Steve, what I need is just a very quick intro. Just tell me who you are, what your rating is and what your ship was in 1982, and then I'll get into the interview.
Okay, my name is Steve Overall. 1982, I was Leading Seaman Radar on board HMS Coventry during the Falklands War.
Excellent, okay. So, Steve, were you destined to be a seafarer? Have you got maritime blood?
At about 4 years old, I wanted to be a ship's captain. My dad had been in the Navy. He was a chief petty officer medical orderly, as they called him at the time.
So, well, I mean, at 4-year-olds, you know, we all had, I wanted to be an astronaut, but never made it. But you did. How did you get into this? Was it literally from that day on you wanted
From that day I wanted to. Didn't really have any plans for doing anything else. Went through school, found out there was a local Sea Cadet unit, joined the local Sea Cadet unit, and they helped, encouraged, taught a little bit, and even assisted with me getting in. So, and I'm now back teaching at the same Sea Cadet unit.
And what year was that then? So when were you getting in there?
72, I think I joined the Sea Cadets, and I joined the Navy in 74. So I did 2 years. I only made it to able seaman, but progression in the Sea Cadets is, it's time and what you're taught, as opposed to you can't push through very quickly. Well, you certainly can't now.
Okay, and what you know, just give me a quick sort of potted history from 74 of the ships that got you up to. Did you join the Coventry in 78?
No, I didn't join there till 81. So I joined the Navy, did my basic training, so went through Raleigh, and then went on to HMS Dryad. Then joined a ship in refit, HMS Mohawk. Joined her early 1975. While she was in refit, all the junior and ordinary seamen got loan draft to HMS Walkerton. She was a ton class minesweeper. We were doing officer training out of Dartmouth Training Squadron. Took them across the Bay of Biscay and had a weekend down in the south of France with the officers. That was fun because it was very, very rough. Came back, took Mohawk through Portland for Portland workup. Did lots and lots of what they called FCS1, Fleet Contingency Ship 1, so patrolling in the North Sea. Managed to get in a 3-month trip in the Mediterranean in 1976, which is where I lost this. Didn't fit in very well. I was bullied quite a lot on that ship, actually. When we got back to the UK, they did offer to fly me off, but when we got back to the UK, I got transferred to HMS Charybdis. Sat with a chief ops on there, and he said, "Why are you still an ordinary seaman?" I said, "Well, no one signed my task books. Go and get them." So we went and got my task books, and the task books are supposed to take about 6 months to sign. Bearing in mind I'd been at sea about 9 months, we sat down with my task books and did them in an afternoon. Because it was, can you do this, can you do that, can you do, yep, signed, can you do this? And we literally went right through it and made me an AB. I left Charybdis at the end of effectively my 2.5 years sea time and went back to HMS Dryad. They were looking for computer trained ratings and did a computer course. Joined HMS Dido in refit. While she was in refit, they were calling out for people to help train principal warfare officers. So it meant travelling up to Portsmouth, working at Dryad for a fortnight as ops room crew, and then going back, joining your ship. And I worked out I could have a long weekend, then a short weekend, and then a long weekend every couple of weeks. So every time any opportunity came up, I jumped at it. But of course, all that time, I was getting additional training. So eventually we got Dido to sea, went through Portland again, and did a 9-month trip out to the Far East. When we finished Portland, I was stopped by the captain, and he actually said, "It's only verbal, but I've had it from Fostaff, you're probably the best APRL they've ever seen go through." Considering it was an anti-submarine ship, it was a bit of an accolade. So we did that, come back. While I was in Singapore, I took my leading hands PPEs because I'd finished another set of task books. And then as soon as I got back, I was drafted off to go and do all my leadership courses, which I did, and then got drafted to join HMS Coventry Friday the 13th of November 1981 in Rosyth.
And
so
what was your role at that point?
I was the Leading Seaman Radar, so seamanship and radar.
guess Coventry would have, that was quite a new ship, wasn't it? It was only 3 or 4
3 years old, I think. Yeah, 78, I think she was built.
So just firstly, I wanted to know just how were your sea legs? You mentioned the Bay of Biscay and the big waves and stuff.
Sea legs are fine. I'd never been sick all the time in the Royal Navy. The only time I've ever been seasick was when I worked for Condor Ferries, and that was only once.
Good. Okay. Yeah. So what was it like? Being posted to the Coventry? Because I mean, it was a quality ship, wasn't it?
It was a quality ship. She was a new ship. She did lots and lots of trials for new bits of kit. She'd also spent an awful lot of time. I mean, when I joined her, she was still part of the Standing Naval Force Atlantic, Stannah Foreland. So when I joined her in Missle, there were 6 other ships from different navies all around Europe and American ships. We sailed and spent another week or so exercising in the North Sea with a trip into Kiel in Germany, and then came back to Portsmouth for Christmas leave. And then sailed again to do more exercises. Again, went through Portland. Why? And then went off down to Spring Train. And of course, everyone knows the story of what happened to the ships after Spring Train.
Yeah. So just talk a bit about the gear that you're using and why Coventry. Why the gear on that was considered such good quality in respect of your role as a radar.
Okay. The navigation radar was fitted to just about all the ships, but it was a newer version. My older ships had all had a system called 978. We were using it was 1006. I'm trying to think who the manufacturer was, but it was just about the latest navigation radar. Then we had a newer system called 992, which replaced the 993, which gave us better range and better coverage through radar lobes and bits and pieces like that. And then we had a double bedstead 965, which was long range air warning radar. They used a double bedstead because the single bedstead had lots and lots of radar lobes. I can't really say too much about what they are, but using a double bedstead, you lost a lot of the lobes and you got a much better picture.
By a lobe, you mean?
The radar goes out literally in lobes.
Yeah.
And the Argentines, of course, because they actually trained their pilots to fly down between the lobes to get in. Or what they actually did most of the time was flying up, under and over the horizon.
And this radar system that you're working on, this is providing you, in terms of navigation, it's detecting objects that are, potentially going to sink the ship, like rocks, etc. It's also providing placement on, in terms of your placement on the sea, and also protection.
Sorry.
Yeah, so just for a layperson, all this sort of jargon's incredibly technical kind of radar equipment, but fundamentally, its role is it's 3 purposes. Or is it pure protection?
No. The earlier one I said, the 1006 radar, is a standard commercial navigation radar. It'll give you contacts up to and just over the visual horizon, because if a contact is higher above a certain height, you can obviously see it over the horizon, so you'll pick it up with the radar from that. The 992 is a local sort of air radar. It gives you much better definition, but that will give you air contacts out to probably around about 50 miles. I still need to be a bit careful on what we're talking, obviously. And the 965, the big long range air warning radar, that'll go out to in excess of 200 miles. So you've got one purely for ships, one for surface vessels and aircraft, and one that basically is just aircraft. You got to remember they were designed as for fighting in the Cold War, so they would be detecting Badger aircraft at over 200 miles, because they're launching their missiles at you from about 180 miles. So you need to pick them up before they launch their missiles, because you need to know where the missiles are so you can take the missiles out.
Yeah, and I mean, and very much that sort of North Atlantic kind of operation. big horizons, no interruption, no
No land masses.
Yeah, yeah, okay, good. That's good to know. And what just describe the Coventry to you as a ship? You know, because you've been on quite a few by this point. You know, what was your digs like? What was it like as a ship to be on? Was it a good ship?
Oh, it's a good ship. Good ship's company. Even though I probably only knew about 25% of the ship's company, 6 months on board. Most of the time we were in defence watches. So even the guys living down the same mess as me, some of them, although I may have met them, I didn't get to know them because we'd be changing watches. One lot would be in bed, one lot would be on watch because we were basically under training all the time. Accommodation was fairly standard for the Navy at the time. There were 70 of us down the mess in bunks that were 3 bunks high, in gulches of 6. But the longer gulches, you'd have a gulch of 6 and then there'd be rows and then into another gulch of 6. But yeah, it's a pretty standard mess day.
What was your skipper like?
Really good. And I don't know if that's hindsight or praise, but certainly I remember Captain Hartdyke. Worked with him quite a lot, obviously, because of being in the ops room, and because we were in defence watches so much, we saw much more of him. Normally, if you're just in cruising watches, you'll see the captain maybe once or twice a week. We were seeing him every 6 hours, but he was also very good at briefing the crew, and he literally said to us, anything that I get that I can tell you, I will. And he did.
I suppose that's because he's aware of threats, so he's giving you, look for this threat.
Not so much on that side. I mean, we actually had a Spanish interpreter on board, and at one point we were listening to the airfields telling the pilots to take off, and we were getting intelligence information coming in telling us what aircraft were taking off as well.
That's down there. Okay, well, look, let's it's good to know a bit about the ship. And what about, before we get to the Falklands, what about the armament that it carried? And did you have any sort of involvement in that side of things, other than know a bit about what it was?
My off-watch action station, because when you man a ship up, you have 2 watches. You have a port watch and a starboard watch. They're then subdivided for normal cruising, so you work 1 watch in 4 and you rotate. If you get into a position of threat, you can go to defence watches, so that half the crew are on watch and half the crew are off watch. Then if it hits a fan, you go fully to action stations. So my on-watch action station was in the ops room as air picture reporter local. My off-watch action station was P1 aimer on the port 20mm gun. So I knew a little bit about it. I knew where to point it.
Was it a good bit of kit to work and operate?
1982, 20mm guns were first developed in the late 30s, early 40s. You see them in all the war films. You see the guys with them funny little metal shields with the spider's web aim in sight. That's a 20mm gun. So very, very old bit of kit, but at the time it was considered as effective. It would have mainly been used for small boats and stuff like that. It wasn't designed for jets.
Okay, so had you even heard of the Falklands before you found out about it when you were in the Med?
Oddly enough, the guy who asked me to go back down with him in 2010, as soon as he heard about it, went, oh, I went there in 1977, I think it was, or 78, on, and I can't remember what ship it was he was on. So he told us all where it was, because, yeah, everybody thought it was off the coast of Scotland. And I know that's a long, long old thing, but yeah, where?
Yeah. And how quickly did Hartdyke sort of explain to you then that, that this sort of antagonism was real and actually you were going to go and play more of a role?
It all came about quite oddly. We were doing spring train, so we were doing high cease firings of our anti-aircraft missiles, and signals started coming in as an exercise. I want you to be prepared for war within 24 hours, and you need to have a man in a kilt with a set of bagpipes on the bridge roof by 0800 tomorrow morning. It was just a way of playing. And the Navy are good at doing things like that. You'll get silly signals coming in asking you to do something silly, but there's an underlying thing with it. You know, I want your full... Why does he want that? Why does the Admiral want that? And why does he want a man up there dressed in a kilt? Of course, the first thing is we need to find somebody who's got a kilt. Okay. And in the meantime, all the heads of departments are going around doing all their checks to see what ammunition they've got, what stores they've got, etc., etc., etc. And odd signals like that. And it wasn't until I think we first heard about it on the World Service that the Argentines had invaded on the 2nd. But then it all fell into place, why we'd all been getting stuff ready. And the next thing we knew, we were alongside Aurora, I think it was. It was an Icara Leander, and taking anything they had spare that was of any use to us, so that we could proceed south, and they turned around and went home. Oh, he's a little monkey.
I'm allergic to you. So
are you allergic to cats?
Yeah. I like them, but I'm allergic to them. If they get... Trouble is, I can't stroke him. If I do, it'll come up on my eyes. But
he's not so bad. If Bella comes in, no, that was him you let out. He's come back in with Zoe. Bella's a black and white cat, and she makes my eyes go poof.
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
So.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, and so, did you steam straight out and south then, or did you come back and?
No, we went straight south. We went alongside Aurora. We did what they call a replenishment at sea. We literally stripped everything, tinned food, anything they could spare. Because she was an Icara Leander ship, she couldn't give us a lot of stuff. She gave us a lot of 20mm ammunition, 3-inch rockets, tinned food, toilet rolls. We literally, you could see she was so much lower, higher in the water when we finished taking stuff off her. We was alongside her about hour and a half, 2 hours, just passing stuff over.
And when you say passing, this replenishment business, were you literally tied up to her, or
No, you steam. Yeah, you steam about, I think it's about 40 foot apart at about 10 to 12 knots. You put a tight line between the two ships that was held either on a winch or by hand, and then you pass stuff across on a pulley system.
And did you get involved in that?
I hated seamanship at the time. So when that opportunity came along, I said to my opposite number, I'll stay in the ops room, you can go and do the RAS, because he loved it. So nearly all the time when anything happened, he was on the upper deck, I was in the ops room.
I think I'd have been the other way around. I like to see that sort of stuff. Just out of interest, I was asking someone this the other day, when they get that first line over, was it a capstan gun that's used to fire the...
At the time it was an SLR.
Oh,
the standard weapon of the time. Now they use an SA-80.
With a rubber bullet and string.
We used to call it a dildo, but it is a rubber bullet with Coston gun line, it's called.
Coston gun?
Coston gun line.
Yeah.
It's the white line. It's in a bucket, and they fire it, and it just releases. And as soon as the projectile hits the ship, you stop the line running, and then you can pass the equipment forwards and backwards between each other.
I think it was called, in the Second World War, they used to call it a Coston gun or Costain gun.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Okay, good. When you were heading south then, were there, you've done so much training, so was there more training that you could do, or did you do different training?
We did quite a lot of damage control training and quite a lot of firefighting training. But because we were trying to get down south and not anyone find us, we turned all the radars off. So we went down in radar and radio silence. There was the 342s, the DLG, Glamorgan and Antrim. In fact, it wasn't Antrim. I've got to get this the right way round now. It was Antrim that came with us. Glamorgan stayed behind because FOF 1, Admiral Woodward, was on there, and he had to get the signals forwards and backwards everywhere. So we all shot off down to Ascension. Whilst we was in Ascension, essential stores were flown back out to us, all what they call vertically replenished by helicopter. They gave us a load more stuff, and literally the day the Hermes and all of them ships were arriving at Ascension, we shot off and we positioned ourselves. if I remember correctly, it was about 1,000 miles north of the islands, and just sat there in radio silence.
And no listening at all, nothing on.
No radios, no radars on. So you see the old war films, they were flashing each other on oldest lamps. Communication between the ships was by oldest lamp.
Brilliant, didn't know that. Brilliant.
But even then, we're being overflown probably every other day by Bear Ds coming out of Angola, which is a big Soviet Tu-53, I think it is, Topolov aircraft. It's their long-range maritime patrol aircraft.
When you say flown over, how high?
Sometimes quite low. I don't know if you've been watching the programme that's on recently, Warship Life at Sea. They were overflown on Monday. But yeah, you'd either see them, because the electronic warfare guys would still be at work, so they'd pick up their radars, their surface search radars, and then you'd put lookouts up, or they would literally come and overfly you at about 1,000 foot just to see who you were, make sure you were there and take numbers and try and get photographs. But that's an ongoing game. It happens all the time.
Yeah, interesting. Let me just button off. Okay, good. This fire training business that you were doing, can you sort of give me an overview, an idea of what that entailed on a ship like the Coventry?
Okay. You'd have a fire drill every day anyway. So you have when you're at sea, you have what they call a standing sea fire party, which is normally marine engineer, mechanics, stokers, because they get a little bit further training than the seamen do. So someone somewhere will say, right, we're going to have a fire here, and someone somewhere will make a pipe, fire in wherever it is. Yeah, standing sea fire party close up. Well, that's normally 4 people. They will run from wherever they happen to be working, grab an extinguisher when they get close, and attempt to put out the fire. Because unlike in Civvy Street, at sea, the ship is more important than the personnel. So if you spot a fire, you raise the alarm, attempt to put the fire out. So by the time the standing sea fire party got there, hopefully the fire's already out. If it isn't, they will attempt to put it out. Somebody will have come along from the Marine Engineer Department. They will assess the situation. If the fire is getting out of control, they will then get guys in breathing apparatus to come and attack. They're called the attack party. Whilst the attack party are getting ready, more people are putting on Fear Naught suits. They're big, heavy woolen suits that they used to use. They're now using the same suits as a fire brigade and breathing apparatus as backup in case the first people can't control the fire. If the initial BA party haven't put the fire out, you're normally in trouble. And all this would be done, and it's timed. And the idea is to see how far you can get. And quite often they would let the exercise run till they're getting to the point where you're about to get the crew to go to emergency stations. Obviously that causes a major hindrance for everybody if you do that. So we very rarely get to that far. But most days it would be basically to see if the attack party and the BA party could get there in time.
Wow, amazing, yeah.
Well, you need to do it.
Yeah, drill.
Yeah.
Train easy, train hard,
yeah.
easy.
Well, even in shore bases, every single day in a naval shore base, there'll be a fire somewhere as a drill.
Yeah, okay, good. All right. How long were you holding up them down for, about 1,000 miles before? And were you getting any more information about what was going on down there? Not
really. We heard that Antrim and Plymouth and Broadsword were detaching, but that's only because I was working in the ops room on Operation Parakeet, which was the retaking of South Georgia. I can't remember if the captain actually told the rest of the crew that, but obviously being in the ops room you get to see signals like that or hear bits and pieces of information and you pick up on it. And we're normally quite careful about what you say outside of the ops room.
And is that that's just a sort of a personal discipline. So even though you're in a shared mess and you'd heard something like that, you wouldn't actually blag it.
You tend not to. You would tend not to. We've all signed the Official Secrets Act, but you don't want to start buzzing too many buzzes round. It used to be quite a thing. On a Type 42, there's a passageway on each side. And we used to go outside one side and start a rumour and see how long it took to come in the other door on the other side, just for a giggle. But if it was serious stuff, you tended to know that you couldn't pass that information around, even though who are you going to tell? You know, it's not like these days we've got a mobile phone. You were at sea. There's no one you could tell. You can't phone home. But yeah, unless the captain actually told the crew, a lot of the crew didn't know a lot of what was going on.
Okay, so how long do you think you were at that sort of position before you then went down towards the exclusion zone?
So let's think. 2nd of April they were there, about the 5th of April, so we were at Ascension about the 10th or 11th. About 3 or 4 days sailing from there, I think, so about the 14th of April. So it would have been nearly 2 weeks. Yeah, been close on 2 weeks we were there, because obviously the Plymouth group went off and took South Georgia on the tail end of April, by which time we had met up with the rest of the task force and was sitting southeast of the islands.
Okay, good. So that takes us, if I'm just trying to think about the dates then, so that's sort of mid-April then, a bit later.
Mid-April we'd have got there, yeah.
Okay. When did the Sheffield get hit?
4th May.
Okay, and the Belgrano was...
2nd of May.
Okay, right. So all this time, I guess it's a sort of wait and watch and work out then for you. So was it quite dull? Did you expect it to happen?
95% boredom and 5% fear. And it's true. It is true. No. I don't think anyone expected it to happen. We all looked in Jane's Book of Fighting Ships and Jane's Book of Aircraft and looked at what they had and what we had. And the obvious big fear was the Exocet. Their San Luis class German submarines, which had 209 class submarines. Belgrano's guns. They had, I think it was about 3 to 5 miles outranged our gun. So that would have meant we had to close another 3 to 5 miles whilst being engaged by her guns if we got into surface action with her. And just the sheer number of aircraft. I think they had something like 200 aircraft. We took 12.
Yeah.
It didn't pose to, but we thought, well, we're a professional navy. We can't call them a third-rate navy because they're actually quite well trained because we trained them.
They had a couple of the same.
They had 2 Type 42s, which is why their pilots spent an awful lot of time attacking their Type 42s because they knew then exactly how to attack ours.
Yeah, good point. Okay. So were you still based sort of southeast of the islands then, when the major incidents, the first sort of major incidents started happening, or had you moved in to sort of support?
On the 1st of May, which was when the Vulcan bomber went in first time, I'm not sure how far away we were. But we certainly picked her up on the long-range air warning radar, and Sheffield did as well. In fact, the Sheffield locked on their 909 ready to launch a missile at it until someone realised who it was. I know, that would have been embarrassing.
Yeah.
And when Sheffield got hit, the morning that Sheffield got hit, if you can imagine the screen, you had the carrier there, you had Sheffield, Glasgow, Coventry. Our main air radar failed. So they swapped us, so we were furthest away from the possible threat, and put Sheffield there.
And did Sheffield not have the same system as you?
She had the same system as us, but our main radar had failed. It was repaired eventually by bits from our toaster. Quite incredible. But yeah, we should have been where Sheffield was when she had a Exocet attack. that morning we'd swap places with her.
How did that affect morale on the ship? Because how many people knew that? I mean, obviously as a radar op, you know there's an issue with a radar. Does the ship's company know that, or?
Most of the electrical department would have known as well. But we use the data link system. Although it's nowhere near as good as it is today, all the ships pick up the radar on their own radar, and then they get a turn on the data link terminal system where they transmit all of their radar picture onto all the other ships. So although we've only got, we'll say 200 miles air cover, our 200 miles overlaps theirs, which overlaps theirs. So you've now got 600 miles of air cover that way and going back in towards the force. So you get quite a big air picture. We needed an AEW aircraft of some description, which is why they rushed the Sea Kings through with the hanging bag. They suddenly realised, yes, we do need this. But yeah, we were relying on everybody else's air picture. But I think it was only down for a few hours.
And how did it, when the Sheffield was hit then? I mean, what was the sort of...
Everything went quiet. I was on watch at the time.
Who told you?
Who told me?
Yeah.
Oh, we knew. What actually happened was we'd been for about 3 days picking up low-flying aircraft. Most of them were seagulls, blowing whales, etc., etc., etc. And the air warfare coordinator in Invincible or Hermes kept saying, no, it's spurious, no, it's spurious, no, it's spurious. When Sheffield got hit, Glasgow picked up an electronic warfare contact. We picked up an electronic warfare contact. Glasgow picked it up on their radar, 2 sweeps only. I was on watch, air picture reporter. My guys picked up the same 2 contacts. Then we saw the missile release. We were all screaming at Orc that there was genuine, and he was saying, disregard, disregard. This is a spoof contact. This is not a real contact. And then all of a sudden from Sheffield, I heard flash, flash, flash. This is hotel, which was Sheffield's call sign down there. And then it just went quiet. And that was when the missile had hit. So I then asked, once it had all calmed down a little bit and we were getting reports from the bridge that they could see the smoke, I asked my chief ops, I said, can I go up and have a look, Dave? And he went, yeah, we're not busy, go and have a look. And I actually went up to the bridge, so up 3 decks, looked out the window, and you could see right out on the horizon just this column of black smoke. I didn't stay up there long, just went up and had a look. I thought, well, some of the other guys might want to see us. So went back down and we took it in turns to go up and have a look. Couldn't see the ship.
Does it cause because you knew and you'd seen that and you tried to call it, does that cause resentment or fear or anger or?
No, but we certainly knew we were going to war from that point. When we hit the Belgrano, it was a case of, yeah, got them. But then you think, hang on, they're just sailors like us. Perhaps this will stop and they'll start talking now, la da 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 da. But when Sheffield got hit, but that was it. We knew we were going in then.
And then because your radar was backing up then, and I mean obviously it's a different, different day, different set of circumstances. But then did you move back to where the Sheffield was? Is that what made you vulnerable?
Because Sheffield was gone, rather than having 3 pickets, we only had 2. So we had to move the ships according to where they thought the threat was coming from to give the best defence for the rest of the group.
Is that when you became a sort of 64 then? You went to...
No, we started doing that when we were going in to bombard the shoreline.
Okay, all right, that's ahead of me then, okay.
Which was 2 days later.
So, I mean, because there was, it was such an intense sort of contracted period, how, up to this point, have you been firing off your sea darts and using some of your anti-air missile stuff? Or
No.
Literally all within the next 2 days?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Let me just stop and start. I mean, because it's so, I don't know that chronology very well, but I know obviously that, there were, you thought you'd got some success, and in fact, it transpired you didn't. But just talk a bit about what you can recall of that next couple of days.
Okay, so if I remember correctly, it was the 8th of May we went into bombard. The day before, one of the DLGs, Arrow and Yarmouth, were in doing shore bombardment, and they got attacked by 3 Mirages, and they all missed, fortunately. I think one of them strafed Arrow, I'm not sure. But we went in on the 8th, and we picked up at full range on our long-range air warning radar a large aircraft, transpired as a C-130 Hercules, where we let it track in till it was right at the end of our CDAR envelope, because obviously a missile can only fire so far, and we launched a missile. We thought we'd missed because the aircraft kept coming in. Broadsword was already working with us at this point. Later on, she reported that she saw 2 contacts fall out of the sky. And what had happened was 2 Skyhawks were her escort. Now, the Argentines reckoned that we didn't shoot their Skyhawks down. However, they crashed and didn't return to Argentina. We still think that was the Sea Dart that took them out. Captain Hartdyke got on because we had a thing called Squawk, which was a secure radio circuit, got on to the Admiral, spoke to the Admiral about it, and allegedly, because we could only hear half the conversation, Admiral Woodward said to him, David, you need to wait till you can see the whites of their eyes, saying you need to let them get further into the envelope to get a better chance of hitting. So a few hours later, we're still on watch, we picked up a Puma flying over land, which is really unusual for us because our radar systems were not designed for picking up aircraft over land. Well, anyhow, it came out south of Stanley and was then a clear target. So we engaged that with a 909, and the guys on the upper deck were very, very joyous in telling us that they'd hit it and it was falling out of the sky like a burning match. So back on to Squawk again to the Admiral, and I actually heard the captain say to him, I can confirm, Admiral, that their eyes are white. So that was our first success. Around about that time, because we were an air defence ship, we were controlling the combat air patrols, the Harriers over the fields. We saw a radar contact on land, or not on land, at sea, didn't know what it was, and the 2 Harriers dropped down through the clouds to investigate, and we never saw the Harriers again. We didn't know what happened to them. They still think what happened was they flew into each other, but the ship we sent them to investigate was the Narwhal, the Argentine spy ship. I think they sent a helicopter out to investigate later. They realised what it was, and then the Sea Harriers actually bombed it, put a bomb through it. I think they killed or injured one of the merchantmen, because there was 2 naval officers and the rest of the crew were merchant navy. Before the SBS went out and they dropped down ropes and took the ship over, realised it was sinking, got as much information off it as they could, and then just left it to sink, having rescued the crew.
How was Hartdyke in, managing all this sort of at the time? Was he cool as a cucumber? You getting flustered?
You always have to appear as cool as a cucumber. How he actually was, I don't know. You've got to be, because the minute you show, and I think he says it in his book, the minute you show any fear, that runs right through a ship. So you've got to be as cool as a cucumber.
So it was a reassuring presence.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
And when you know you've got a success like that, does that, is that transmitted through the ship so you feel like you're actually getting somewhere?
The whole ship cheered. Once they heard one lot, because obviously you hear a Sea Dart go off. This thing launches it, and it's doing Mach 2 by the time it's left the rails, which is where it launches from. So by the time it goes over the ship side, it's doing Mach 2. You just hear whoosh, and away it goes. And then when you hear the upper deck cheer, and you think that probably hit something.
And what about when you bombardment? What was what guns did you have?
4.5 Mark 8. Really, really good, really, really effective gun. However, the early mods kept jamming. So while we were doing our shore bombardment, I think we were firing off about 6 rounds, and then the gun would jam, and it was normally a micro switch. So we'd have to wait, leave it for, I think it was about 40 minutes, go up, clear the jam, get ready again. And well, I thought that was really effective, because can you imagine if you're ashore, you get half a dozen rounds land, so you all take cover, you're waiting for the next lot, and by the time you actually think, well, maybe there aren't any more coming, there's another 6 coming. But yeah, it kept jamming on us. In fact, our gun, I think, kept jamming nearly all the way through the conflict. And the others were not much better, but obviously they improved them, and they found out what the faults were.
Okay. How much do you think the rest of it, so just picking up on that point, you know, the whole ship cheered. So ultimately people are getting a good sense of what is going on from the lower ratings.
Oh yeah, once you're actually in amongst it, yeah. And you'll hear lots of other ships, like the first lieutenant, because he's in HQ1, which is where they fight all the damage control from, he's getting an update from the captain, but he can then go onto the main broadcast and tell the whole ship what's going on. And something like that, you know, there's no secret in, yes, we've just shot down a Puma. The whole ship gets to hear about it.
Yeah, okay, cool. Okay. All right, tell me, you carry on, you're doing a great job. So.
Okay. I can't remember dates,
No, okay.
but a couple of days later, and I can't remember why we were sent on a SAG, we're a Surface Action Group, but we were sent off anyway. An A-Sea King reported being engaged by a 1/2-inch gun, 5mm, heavy machine gun. So we immediately launched our links on a surface search to go and find where it was, but armed with a completely untried missile. Up to then, all helicopters have been armed with the AS-12. This thing was called a Sea Skewer. Glasgow launched hers as well, but she was about 30 minutes behind us. It was off to the north of the island somewhere, but our pilot picked up a contact, launched a Sea Skewer at it, and then came back, and the captain actually went to meet him. I didn't hear the conversation, but the captain went to meet him when he landed on, and he said to him, did you hit it? And his very words were, I blew it to fucking pieces. He said, I saw this enormous explosion. He said, there can't be anything left of it. Well, Glasgow went to the same area and shot another one at something else or at the same ship. The Argentines still say there was only one ship there and we only damaged it, and they've still got the bridge on display in a museum in Argentina. We actually think that was the second ship, and the one that we hit something fairly sensitive and actually blew it completely to bits. But we can't verify it. But yeah, that was quite an exciting few minutes when that was going on.
Were you ever under attack yourselves? You know, pre-actual being attacked?
No, because no one ever got close enough. And I know that sounds big-headed. Every time there was anything got anywhere near us, either we got a cap in to take it out before it got to us, or we took it out with sea dart. We were, I think we're still credited as the most effective 42 that was down there, and I think we were credited with something like 6 aircraft, but we actually controlled the cap, taking out a lot more as well.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's you know, unless you've got other particular standout memories, which that's what I'm here for. You know, if you've got
10th, May the 10th was the day when Glasgow got the bomb go right through her, doing the same thing as we've been doing on the 8th. That meant that out of 3 Type 42s, there was only one left. That was quite worrying, thinking, hang on, A, we've got the responsibility now of defending the main body, the aircraft carriers, and B, if they're taking the 42s out that easily, how long will it be?
Right, yeah. And
So,
have you lost mates at this point? Are you aware of people on these other ships?
I think the Sheffield's crew list came out, and because I'd only just joined the 42, because you tend to find, once you're trained on a particular ship, you tend to stay in that sort of, although a lot of us were ADORS trained, so we could have gone ICAR Leander, Type 42, I-class carriers, you tended to still stay in your little group. So I'd only just moved up from Plymouth onto a Portsmouth-based ship, so didn't know that many people. Once I started getting to know names, I mean, there's lots of guys on the Sheffield I found out later that I actually knew, both dead and still surviving now. But at the time, there was just a list of names, as you know.
Yeah, it's only when you start to put the...
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's an unease now. You're the last one. And is that why you went into this 64 thing with the broadsword?
We was already doing that.
Okay.
Because we were operating close to land, Type 42s, they knew, couldn't defend themselves if anything came off of land. So they put a 22 there, which has what they call a Doppler radar. And a Doppler radar picks up movement as opposed to a radar reflection. So it's good for tracking stuff over land.
Right, which is why it was unusual for your radar to have picked something off of land. Because, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess what's happening, you're expecting stuff to come back, aren't you? Whereas it bounces off, it goes all over.
It goes all over the place. And if you look on any of the TV programs, you'll see the land shows up as a big orange curve or whatever it happens to be. Well, it's not only that bit, nearly everything behind it. Unless something's flying quite high, you've lost everything behind where that line is. So you have to be really on the ball to pick anything up.
Okay, all right, well, carry on then.
So that was what?
10th.
10th or 12th of May, yeah. Glasgow got hit on the 10th. I think we didn't go then inshore because they needed us, so they were sending the DLGs, the county class destroyers, in to do bombardment, which made more sense because they had a twin 4.5, the older Type 4.5, as opposed to the new ones, and the Type 12s. So Yarmouth and Plymouth were going in, still going in with a 22 to goalkeeper them. And then
a gun that works.
with a gun that fight, yeah. And then I suppose we stayed out with the main body then, pretty much until the day of the landings on the 21st. We went in and we sat where we were at Pebble Island, 12 miles north of Pebble Island, providing an air picture. Because obviously once they were inside San Carlos water, the ships were all blind.
Well, I mean, even though the air picture you were giving them wasn't superb, was it? I mean, you might be able to tell them there was an incoming, but your radar wasn't getting around the island either, really, was it?
No, we were sitting 12 miles north of Pebble Island, so anything coming into the islands, because they were flying in at height and then dropping once they got to the islands, so we could pick them up from over 200 miles away, plus we had intelligence to tell us roughly when they were coming, so we knew when to really be on the ball, not that we weren't anyway. We could then give the picture into the ships in San Carlos to give them a better idea, and quite often that's why Ardent was positioned where she was in Chorsel Sound, which was the sound between the two islands, so that she could use her radar. Once we told them they were coming, they would then pick them up and then convey their message in as well. So yeah, we were just given a radar picture, and in the hope that they would know we were there, and that would drive them down so they could only come into San Carlos from one direction. Because if they tried coming in from the north, they'd get taken out by us or by the cap.
And you were sat there with broadsword, is that right?
It was sat with broadsword, yeah. So we would sit there all day, race out to the main body in the evening, refuel all night and rearm all night, and then race back in again and sit there again all day.
How frenetic was it in the day?
During the daytime it was quite busy, and no one really told us that the only aircraft they had, that was another incident, we must have been north of the islands, around about the 15th or 16th, we picked up a contact at long range, and it was another big aircraft, tracked it right in to the edge of the envelope, put a missile on the launcher, in fact put two missiles on the launcher, let it get closer and closer and closer. I think we let it get to about 20 miles. Went to engage it with a sea dart, and nothing happened. And this aircraft came in and in and in. And we weren't sure what it was because there was no radar on it. It didn't have a radar so we could detect what it was. Turned out it was a Boeing 707 doing surface search. It was an Argentine one, but it just turned and went away. And when we went up and investigated where the flash doors were, when the missile comes onto the launcher, there's a door that has to close so that no flames can go down into the magazine. It's closed on the micro switch that tells it is shut. The micro switch was encrusted with salt.
Wow, so you could have taken that.
So we could have taken out 707.
Wow, that's interesting. Right, just one sec, I've got to...
No, all aircraft have been warned to stay out of the area.
Okay. When you were, you know, after a few days of being in this position with the broadsword and getting a sense of how things were going and how effective the radar was and where its weaknesses were, you talked about this sort of this opportunity that the RGs had to come down sort of between the bands. Did you feel like you were a sitting target?
No. And we knew the captain had sent a signal off saying he wanted to move further out to sea to give the radar a better chance of picking up contacts, because at 12 miles, an aircraft doing 600 miles an hour, you've got 2 minutes. You know, it's not a lot of time to pick it up, put a track on it, get a missile on the launcher and fire it. He wanted to move, I think it was a further 10 miles out, and he was right in a way. The Admiral said, no, I need you there, because if you go too far out, you won't be able to give a radio picture or a radar picture into the ships, and they'll lose that extra cover. So that's when we became known as the tethered goat, and we were a sacrificial goat effectively at that point. But you're there doing a job. You just get on and do the job. What else do you do? You know, ours is not the reason why.
And how many other ships have been hit during this period then? I mean, you're starting to see some fairly significant...
On the 21st, you had Ardent sunk. Antelope got bombed, but it didn't go off till the 23rd. Argonaut was hit, but the bomb didn't go... Oh, no, the bomb went into her Sea Cat magazine, started a fire, but it also punctured a diesel tank, and the diesel put the fire out. Don't ask me how, but it did. 2 guys in a magazine got killed and actually drowned. That's a local lad, one of them. He's got a memorial stone up at Poole Seaview. So Galahad got bombed.
So really, it's, you know...
Lots and lots of ships were getting hit. Lots and lots of ships were getting hit because their pilots were brilliant. But again, guess who trained them? You know, we trained them, the Americans trained them. But they play polo, and they're quite brave.
Yeah, yeah, they play polo, yeah. Interesting, and I was chatting to just as an aside, I was chatting to someone on the Europic, and basically his feeling is that actually the Argentinians could have been a lot more successful in terms of...
They took the wrong targets. They should have hit the merchantmen, not the warships.
Yeah, take the merchantmen and then come for the warships.
Yeah. But the merchantmen were positioned quite well. They planned where they put them so that they were tucked away. They were more difficult to get at, and the warships were racing around in the middle. And of course, again, if you pop up over a piece of land and you're flying up a 2-mile ravine full of water, you're going to aim for the first thing you see. Yeah. So what do you see? This thing going around in circles with white plumes of water out the back of it, rather than the stuff that's tucked away around the sides.
Okay, well let's move to the it was the 25th, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Normal day?
Normal day. I think my opposite number at one... No, I must have been on watch. The day before, my opposite number had said, oh, we've had another couple, da 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 da. So yeah, been out all night replenishing. I'd been awake about 24 hours, most of which was in the ops room. Me and the air picture supervisor both had conjunctivitis, and we were putting drops in each other's eyes at the start of each watch. Yeah, normal day. The Argentines came in. We were directing Cap to take them out, etc., etc. Captain never gave us that bit of information. The Spanish linguist on board a guy called Lieutenant Jamie Miller, went on to be a Commodore. Apparently had received a signal saying that they were going to get that Type 42. So the captain knew they were coming for us, and so did the Spanish language, but that's the sort of information I think you wouldn't want to give the crew anyway. But 2 aircraft turned away. They failed because they were going to come in 2 batches of 3. 2 of them had problems. I can't remember what the problems were, but the 4 of them came out, and as they hit the islands, they split. One went across the islands and came out and attacked us, and they're the ones that hit broadsword. And the other 2 came completely up the coast, but flew so close to the coast that we couldn't see them, and just turned out and came and took us.
You were trying to take evasive action though, weren't you, at the time?
The captain still says that somebody, and we've never found out who or where, had told him there were more aircraft to the north. Now, whether somebody had visually seen the aircraft along the island and had got mixed up with norths and souths, etc., we don't know. But yeah, to give his firing arcs, the captain turned the ship to starboard as the aircraft came out. Now, normally, if you're getting attacked by an aircraft, you try and give them a beam aspect, because then the bombs will either fall short or fall over the top. By turning, we actually gave them an almost full-length aspect. So the 2 aircraft came in, 2 bombs from one aircraft hit, and 1 bomb from the second aircraft hit. And all 3 went off because the sun had very kindly on the 21st told them they weren't fusing them properly. So 40 foot long, 5 foot wide hold, right down the ship's side, 3 major machinery spaces.
What was the impact like?
Very odd. Sat in the ops room, everything went dark. Well, to take from the beginning, we picked up the aircraft. I got my lads, look, there's a new contact there, get a track on it. We got a track on, got the TI ops, they're the guys that aimed the 909 radar to aim at it. The 909 couldn't get a lock on because, for the same reason, it was bouncing off the land onto the sea and couldn't fix the aircraft, so it was doing that. Got a missile on the launcher. We couldn't get to lock on, so we fired a missile down the bearing. Well, that just went rogue and went straight up in the sky. Then the 4.5 gun went off, and you could obviously the guys below deck could hear whoosh, and then bang, 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 bang. Then we heard bang, 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 which is my 20 mil. My opposite number firing is 20 mil. Then the machine guns going. Then it just went all dark and all quiet, and it was just a whoomph, and you felt the ship go like that. It rocked the ship. In fact, there was a guy who had an ingrowing hair, and he was using a pillow. And when the ship went dark, I actually spun in my seat and went, Jesus Christ, what the fuck's happened? And I could see all these white feathers floating down. Even though the ops room was in almost total darkness, what he'd done, he burst the pillow. Turned back round to my seat just in time for the bomb to go off in the computer room. And I got thrown round the back of my display. And I don't know how long I was there. I didn't think I'd been unconscious, but the more I think about it, there was 2 people sat next to me, 2 people in that corner, and I ended up underneath the chairs of the 2 people sat here. Well, I never saw any of them go. So I must have gone unconscious for a short period of time. But when I came round, or when I became aware of things, most of us had what we called a survival bag. I had a carrier bag with a jumper and a notepad, and in my rigging sets were a knife and some sweets and stuff, just survival stuff. That was a light. So I used that light to find my way round the ops room. The ops room was full. Somebody went across to the door on our side and looked out and went, "We can't get it out of here. There's a fucking great hole in the ship's side." And it was apparently it had gone in through the ship's side and had ripped right through the deck in 2 deck and gone into the computer room, which is where obviously I think there were 6 guys down there who didn't get out. But the ops room was full of people. So I reached forward and grabbed the ankle of the person in front of me, thinking when he moves, I'll be able to move. That was my air picture supervisor. When we eventually got on to Uganda, he said to me, he said, do you know what, I thought someone had me in a death grip down there. I said, what are you on about? He said, well, when I was waiting to get off, he said, someone grabbed my ankle. And I went, that was me. And he went, you bastard. I said, what? He said, look. And he's still got a thumb and 2 fingerprints because his socks were melted. And I melted them literally into his leg where I'd grabbed his ankle. So he probably still carries them scars today.
I mean, I'm being a bit sort of naive here, but you know, when you've lost all power like that, is there sort of emergency red lighting and stuff like that? Or is it total?
There is emergency lighting, but there were little fires all around the ops room, all little bits of paper and people's books and like life bags and stuff. So you couldn't see a lot, but you could see enough. I mean, because we were in and out of the ops room all the time, the actual passage across the ops room, there's a complete bank of chairs and information. There's 2 big displays and the captain's display. That's only about 2 foot wide across there, so you haven't got a lot of space. But yeah, not far short of total darkness. What I was surprised about, the surface picture supervisor, who was behind the second big display, turned round to try and get his task books. Why he would want to get his task books, I don't know. But he said, I couldn't get my task books because the whole display had disappeared down into the computer room. Now these displays are probably the size of this chair, if not bigger. It's just gone. Now how we didn't fall down the hole ourselves into the computer room, I don't know. Because we all went past that to get out.
How long do you think, well obviously taking off the fact that you may have been unconscious, how long do you think it took you to get out?
I think I was on the upper deck within about 5 minutes. So I went across the ops room. The ladder on the other side that goes up to the bridge, the bottom 3 rungs were broken because they were wood. But I managed to climb up that, went up one deck. What I should have done was gone a little bit further forward and straight out onto the upper deck. But that entrance was normally used by the officers. When I was in the ops room, if I went up the first thing, I was normally going to the bridge. So I then went round and up another deck, round and up onto another deck. And I saw the surface picture supervisor there in the distance. And I didn't see who it was. I said, you need to come this way. He later told me that he'd gone up to there and had got lost and was about to sit down and just give up. So, and I then I went up, pushed the smoke hatch open onto the bridge and appeared like sort of some sort of genie in this cloud of smoke onto the bridge. The officer to watch, the gunnery officer, Lieutenant Pollard, looked round, and I can still remember his face today. He just looked and just went, as his chin dropped, as this smoke bedraggled thing came up the ladder, and went out onto the starboard starboard bridge wing. And
how much of a tilt was there at this point?
Not that much at this point, which is why I think it was only about 5 minutes. Got into a once-only suit, because obviously I'd left mine down a flame down in the ops room, and I looked at the Chief Ops N, Dave Nunn, who's no longer with us, by which time the ship probably had 10 or 15 degrees of heel on her. I said, she's going over, Dave. And he went, do you think so? I said, yeah. And I said, do you think we should launch a life raft? Because no one was saying anything. There was no communications or nothing. And he went, do you know what, it's a good idea. And we actually climbed down on the Olympus intakes, which if they'd given out, if you look at the picture of Coventry blowing up, you can actually see little thin strips. They're bits of the Olympus intake fins. So if we went there, if we'd actually collapsed through them, we'd have dropped right down into a sealed compartment where the Olympus gas turbine engine was. Wouldn't have got out. But we clambered down them because the ship was now leaning over like that, and actually managed to push the 5 life rafts over that you see in the first picture of Coventry sinking. And me being a reasonably good swimmer but hating diving, then carried on down, lowered the swimmer to watch gear down to the waterline and climbed down that and got into a life raft completely dry.
And have you been burnt at this point? Have you got much
Yeah.
damage?
Yeah, I didn't realise I'd been burnt at this point. Didn't even notice. We'd cut the fingers off, our first 2 fingers off our gloves, anti-flash gloves, because it made it easier for using the keyboards. Both fingers had swollen right up. But I don't know, it's a shock or adrenaline or whatever it was. didn't even notice. But got into the life raft, 48 men in a 25-man life raft. Everybody else's seemed to go aft. Our one, for some reason, went forward. And it's the same one, oddly, that the captain and Lieutenant Jamie Miller were in. We went round the bow of the ship. The 4.5 gun was still in its position. The ship was now probably at about 80 degrees over, because the barrel from the 4.5 gun came in through the entrance to the life raft. So we were all having to push that off, bearing in mind it was hot because it had been firing 10 minutes beforehand. Went a bit further aft and punctured on the end of the live Sea Dart missile, which only needed a 12-volt supply put to it, and it would have shot off the launcher, doing Mach 2 by the time it went off the launcher. Would have cooked a lot of us. But as it punctured, somebody outside decided they needed to stand on something to get back on the ship. That was on my head. So I was then back underwater, inside the life raft, but managed to get out. Lieutenant Jamie Miller, apparently, and he'll tell this in his after-dinner speeches, got the life raft wrapped around his legs, because there's lots of little bits of line on them, and it started pulling him down. He thought, I can't do this, I've only just got married, and managed to bob to the surface. I'd never met him properly, because he'd literally joined the ship before we sailed. We ended up both stood on a spare anchor. So at this point, the ship is now at 90 degrees. And I was looking up into the bridge, and you used to be able to get A4 blue plastic folders. And I was watching them floating about, laughing at them, thinking, well, they're not going to get used anymore, are they? There's daft things that go through your head. Going back to Jamie Miller's story, he still says that he saw the back of the 4.5 gun, the door open, or he thought it blew off. And he said to me, we better get back in the water because the explosion from that could kill us. So we then got back in the water. There was about 5 of us in the water at this point there. And in one of the pictures you see of the ship going over, there's a Sea King hovering in about that position. I think that's the Sea King that picked us up, because it picked up several of the others, lowered the hoist down. I passed it to Jamie Miller and said, sir, you better put this on. And he went, no, you better put it on. He said, you're injured. And then he went, and by the way, this is going to hurt. This is all going on with a helicopter about 15 feet above us. We're fighting over who's going to get in the helicopter's drop. So he put it on, and then that's when I realised I was injured, because as it put the weight on under my shoulders, I thought, oh, that does hurt. So it got taken from there, dropped onto Broadsword, where they triaged us all. Literally got stripped off, showered. Those that needed any medical attention were given some medical attention, and then sent down a mess, given a can of beer. Those that smoked were given cigarettes. And not long after that, got called back up to be hoisted back off again to go to Uganda.
Oh, so you ended up on Uganda.
I ended up on Uganda. Can you stop me? I need a wee.
You should have said.
No.
I mean, it's interesting to hear you, because I can tell that this is a sort of, this is a sort of a recurring sort of series of memories almost that's going through your head. What's it like to see the ship that you have been on and have got a pride in, and you laughed at these blue folders, but to see that ship just tipping over,
I didn't see what the rest of them saw. A lot of the guys actually got back onto the upper deck and saw her upside down, and they were into. There's actually somebody has written a poem. If I can find it, I've got it on my laptop somewhere. I'll send it to you, and it's a really, really sad poem. But yeah, I was injured. I was down in the wardroom, being treated, and of course, them flown straight off. Actually, that's another one. John Stevenson, the air picture supervisor, who's got my finger marks. We got lifted off at the same time, so we got taken out. He'd lost his trousers; they were burnt off him, but he had his shirt, and I'd lost my shirt. That they'd given me another shirt, but Stevie had a pusser's white blanket wrapped round him. So he went before me. So they lowered a crewman on a hoist. Why they had to lower a crewman, I don't know, because we'd all been quite happily getting in hoists out of the water. But they lowered this crewman, and he wrapped his legs round Stevie, wrapped a helicopter strap onto him, and you lifted him up. And I've got this enduring image of this white blanket with a pair of legs and John Stevenson's legs just dangling underneath it. It still sticks in my mind as a funny thing.
Yeah. Do you remember what your treatment was like on the Uganda, just out of interest?
Excellent. I remember going on, I remember landing, because we landed on Uganda and got taken out of the helicopter. I don't remember going through a triage thing, but I think because we were burnt, we went straight to the ship's sick bay. Because although she was a hospital ship, when she was a cruise liner, she had a sick bay as well. So we went straight to the sick bay, and there were 10 of us, I think. John Strange, who was on the Sheffield, who had 90% burns, was actually absolutely covered in what the treatment was then, which is stuff called flamazine. It's like a white cream. Absolutely covered. You wouldn't have recognised him at all. And he didn't say anything to any of us, basically because he couldn't move his mouth. He was being fed by water because he was so badly injured. They actually didn't expect him to live. There was me, John Stevenson, P.W.O., Shady Lane, the P.W.O.U., I can't remember his name. His lieutenant that begins with G, because we were all quite badly burnt. The captain, for some reason, didn't come on. Although he was burnt, he had flash burns. I don't think he was quite as bad as us. The Chief GI, Chief Ellis, and the other Chief GI, and I can't remember his name, he's no longer with us. They were all in there. And yes, we just got on with it again.
Yeah, what's interesting, I mean, I interviewed Lord West, and Lord West, makes a big thing about, last off the ship and all the rest of it. I mean, totally different circumstances, because it was a sort of, there was a chance to sort of almost save it. What was, you remember the sort of the bubble that you're in, do you? Could you, I mean, where was Hart Dyke? Where was...
He was on our life raft with us.
Okay, so he was kind of in your area.
He was on our life raft, and when we got back on the ship, I'm not sure how and where he got back on board, but he still claims he was one of the last back off, but he was up on the ship's side somewhere. He'd managed to get up onto the ship's side, whereas we were where the ship, because that would have been 20 foot above us by the time we got back onto the ship. So, but yeah. He probably would have been amongst the last off, but it was, almost every man for yourself because the ship's going over. There was no comms. There was no way of communicating throughout the ship. And if anything had to be done, it would have to been done by voice.
And once you've sort of got to grips with the fact that you survived and you're getting on with it now, how much information, how quickly can you get information about your shipmates and stuff? And how did you find out, did you lose good mates and stuff?
Every time we went to action, one of the guys from the computer room used to come and stand behind me, one of the weapons electrical mechanics. The day we got sunk, oddly enough, the two POGIs were wearing their proper jackets. They didn't help, they just burnt. And I'd pulled my jumper over and I'd said to him, I said, you better go down the hole. I said, because this one looks like it's going to be serious. Of course, he never came back. Yeah, we were... Ops department wise, we were quite lucky. Quite a lot of us got injured. Most of the casualties were the first day party, because that was nearly all chefs and people like that, and they were in the dining hall. The dining hall took a bomb and it literally blew the floor up, and then it collapsed into the machinery space. The guys in the computer room, obviously, and one of those, the lieutenant who was in charge down there, was seen climbing up the ladder just by the hatch where I was. And our PWO went to try and give him a hand, but he said he was in the right state anyway, and he just fell back in, and there was nothing he could do for him. But yeah, it was guys all around the ship. There's guys down the machinery spaces. A lot of them, I'd never met them.
How many did pass away on that ship? 19.
And the two laundrymen, there's a story there as well. The number one laundryman, when he realised what was going on, grabbed all the money from the laundry and ran with that. And the number two laundryman thought, that's a good idea. And he grabbed all the bags of coins. went over the side, and they recovered his body a few days later. But yeah, poor bugger.
Greed.
Well, it wasn't greed, I don't think. But yeah, grabbing the coins is not very clever. Yeah.
No, fair enough. Yeah. So did you, after Uganda, I take it you were just sort of, did you come back on a ship, or were you flown?
No, we stayed on I think we was on Uganda for about a week, but Uganda at the time was going in at night time or daytime. I can't remember which. I think it was at night time, to pick up casualties from Ajax Bay. Well, the Argentines actually announced it and put it across through Bahia Perosa as well, which was the Argentine hospital ship, that if they found her in Ajax, in San Carlos water, they would sink her as a troop ship. Well, that got back to us, and we were thinking, hang on. Because they thought we were taking munitions in and replenishing troops. Well, in actual fact, what they were doing was going in, rather than having to fly casualties all out, just going in and doing short hops with casualties. But yeah, I think that stopped as soon as they received that signal.
And so how did you get back to the UK then?
Spent about a week on Uganda, got a lift with the craziest WASP pilot I think I've ever met. He was literally taking off from Uganda, doing a 90-degree climb and lift, and literally going like that in a circuit and dropping onto the Herald, put onto the Herald, and we went from Herald, I think it was 4 or 5 days, up to Montevideo, unloaded into a coach, armed police escort from there to a waiting VC-10 that was surrounded by guards with very, very savage-looking Alsatian guard dogs, straight onto that, flown to Ascension. We were allowed to look out the door at Ascension. We weren't allowed off while they refueled. Normally, if they're refueling an aircraft, you have to get off. Ascension was still full of Victors and Vulcans and Phantoms and all loaded, so they couldn't let us off. It would be more dangerous to let us off than it was to refueled and then flew straight into Brize Norton.
Any welcome party?
No. Parents are there. My parents are there. We got offered, those of us that could, were offered, you can either come on the bus and go to Hasler, but if your parents are here, you can go home with your parents. That's a really hard decision to make, isn't it?
How worried were your parents? Did you find out? Did you speak to them afterwards? How old were you in the Falklands?
24.
So you've got really no empathy with what your parents are feeling?
Not really, no. My dad, as I said, was an ex-chief chief medic. He happened to be in Portsmouth and ended up treating the guys off of Sheffield. Even though he was a reservist, he somehow managed to, I don't know how he, or so he says. I never did manage to verify it. My mum, for some reason, she was quite into spiritualism, and she said she was told that I was okay. But you don't know. You don't know. But yeah, they were worried at the time. And one of the worst things was when Glasgow got hit, they announced that another Type 42 destroyer had been hit. They didn't say which one. So there were 2 crews, families, worried about which ship it was. But when Coventry got sunk, of course, they announced the fact that it was us, as with Sheffield.
And how do you reflect on the Falklands now?
Completely and utterly changed my life. I would probably have stayed and done 22. I did 9, and at the time the 42s were doing trip to the Falklands, home leave, trip to the Gulf, home, trip to Falklands, home. And I thought, well, I don't want to do that. Do I sign to, because we were in a bit of a recession then as well, do I sign and do 22, and will I get a job at 40? You know, being that young, old man of 40, will he get a job? So I came out, which was the biggest mistake I ever made, I think.
Never thought to join the reserves?
No, and when I did think about joining back up, I'd left it 6 years and I got told I'd have to go back through basic training, and I thought, no, I don't want to do that, and never bothered. Again, a big mistake. I could have redone it.
And did you find that, so I mean, you talk, without, I don't need to get into detail, but you know, was it was it the transition to civilian life, or was it the trauma of, or the excitement, or the mayhem of being in the Falklands that made it difficult or dull?
It's definitely dull. I've hidden in a lorry for 40 years, effectively. I can be on my own in a lorry, although I've got work to do and I've got to do that. I can sit there with my thoughts all day long, and I have pressures of work, but don't have any other sort of pressures. Unfortunately, now I'm coming to realise that I should have used my drive and pushed myself, because I could have got so much further than I am, instead of being sat in a lorry all day.
Did you have PTSD, or have you had flashbacks?
Around about 18 years ago, I split up with my eldest daughter's mother, and we got up one morning. She went, "I want the keys. I don't want you to come home." And I went into work and stood at a machine in tears. They sent me home, and I had to go and move back in with my parents. And eventually, they got me to see the occupational doctor where I was working, who just happened to be an ex-Royal Naval lieutenant surgeon. She sat with me for about 10 minutes and said, "You ex-forces?" I went, "Yeah." She went, "Falklands?" I went, "Yeah." She went, "Tell me a bit about it." And she said, "I think you've got PTSD, because why else would you stand at work just in tears?" I went for an assessment, and I don't know what was going on at the time. The guy that actually did the assessment on me assessed me as having post-traumatic anxiety disorder, which whenever you talk to anyone, they go, "What's that?" No one's ever heard of it. But that's what I've been labelled with, and I don't know. I've never had, well, I have. The first night I got back in the UK, I woke up screaming, "I'm all right, leave me alone." And I've since had a serious motorcycle accident in 2013. About 3 weeks after that, I relived that just once. So I don't know whether I'm very good at putting things away in a box, but until, I don't know, about 5 years ago, I could close my eyes and be back in the ops room on Coventry, just like that. In fact, I could do it now. It's just I've learnt to control it, which I suppose is a way of dealing with it.
Well, I mean, I really appreciate you spending this time reliving it for me. I hope it hasn't been a traumatic experience. I mean, the thing about this is you've expressed yourself. It's on here. Other people will hopefully learn from it, and I'm sure that universities, Portsmouth, it's future generations of people wanting to know about the Falklands. That's an incredibly vivid account, and some lovely detail. Historical detail about systems and operations and stuff that is fast becoming obsolete. So appreciate it.
There's a lot I could tell you, a lot more I could tell you, but I don't know where we are regards Official Secret Act and stuff like that, because obviously I'm still, even now, sorry, I must stop touching them, signed to it. Things like how far the radars go and the range of missiles and, etc. It's still in here, just can't tell you.
No, sure enough. Well, you write your memoirs down one day.
Yeah.
One thing you did mention I was a bit curious of was the sort of loading of the missiles. I sort of assumed that there'd be like a sort of a, what do they call it when you put the thing in the gun? A magazine. I assumed there'd be an automatic magazine of missiles that come up and reload. Was it all manually done, was it?
No. Sea Dart missile, the magazine had in excess of 20 missiles. They were on a railway system, which is quite hard to believe. I think it was an 18 or a 20-foot missile just sitting on a railway mount, which went up round a conveyor belt, so you could select any of the missiles. They came underneath the mount. They went onto a rail, which lifted the missile off its platform, put it up through a flash door, which then closed. A second flash door then opened, and the actual firing alarm had to turn the wrong way round, because the original missile system was designed to go on the back of the Type 82s, HMS Bristol class. So the missile system on the 42s was the wrong way round. So the missile mounting had to turn completely round the wrong way. The missile came up onto the launcher. The second flash door closed. The missile then rotated on its launcher to point in the direction the radar wanted to go, and then it was launched. If you want to make a note and look up HMS York Sea Dart firings on YouTube, very, very good video, and she launches about 8 missiles, and it runs through the whole sequence, and you just see them all firing off, and it's done to Queen's Don't Stop Me Now, I'm having such a good time.
And it was that second lid that came down that had been
The second lid, yeah, it crashed it over, yeah.
That's an amazing thing to have learned about, isn't it? I mean, so
Yeah.
there'll be down some sort of freshwater spray that will always keep that clear or whatever.
The original design of the Type 42 was 30 foot longer, and they cost cutting, saved 1% of the build cost and made them 30 foot shorter. The last 442s were 30 foot longer, they were quicker, they were more fuel efficient, and they didn't get waves coming over the bows. So we learnt from that. The same as the 22s. The 22s didn't have a gun. The batch 3 Type 22s, which were the ones built post Falklands, had a gun, Exocet and Seawolf. They were so well armed for their day.
What do you think went wrong? I mean, why do you think that the British fleet, which had such great technology, was took such a battering?
Years and years of defence cuts. Years and years of we only need to defend the Iceland Faroes gaps. It's what we were built for, what the ships were designed for. Out there, if we'd have been operated out there, it wouldn't have been an issue, or that much of an issue. We were not expecting low-flying aircraft to come and attack us. We were designed for taking out squadrons of Badgers. Didn't have a Doppler radar, although the Type 22s did, but that was very, very modern radar in them days. When Exeter came down, she had the replacement of the 965 1022, which was a Dutch radar, much more complex, much better radar than the 965. Again, they wanted to get the 42s out, so they put the 965 on while the 1022 was still being developed. As ships went into refit post Falklands, they all got the 1022 radar fitted. Eventually, the 992, the medium range radar, was replaced by, I want to call it 968, which was similar to the Type 22's Doppler radar. So they then had the ability to track aircraft over land. They sorted out close-in weapons by removing the boats and putting an extra 20mm gun and a twin 30mm gun, and then they replaced the 30mm gun with Vulcan Phalanx. So when I joined Nottingham straight after Coventry, the first thing we did was go to Portsmouth, took the guns off. They were fitted for but not with Phalanx, and fitted with a 30mm and a 20mm, and we went straight back down to Falklands again. Literally, I was there in 82 and I was back down there in 84.
Yeah, something else you talked about was also that the British trained and do you think that the Argentine pilots were lucky or great? Or a bit of
both, definitely both. They had a lot of good aircraft. Skyhook was always a good aircraft. Mirage was a good aircraft. The Dagger was the Israeli version of the Mirage, and they had fantastic training. I mean, they produced good polo players, good footballers, good horse riders in general. That sort of, and good car racing drivers, and good pilots.
Yeah, they're quite a talented bunch. It's just a shame they can't work out. They need good bankers now, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, in air-to-air combat, they weren't very good. The Sea Harrier beat them every single time.
Didn't get that involved though, did it?
No, because they turned and ran away. Not for any. Eventually, once they realised that they just couldn't take the Harrier on, I think they must have been drilled that if you get attacked by a Harrier, just drop missiles and go. Because they could outrun a Harrier easily.
Yeah, it's a staggering. It's staggering that it's so. Because obviously I've interviewed lots of Second World War, veterans and stuff, And the Second World War seems aloof. It is, you know, it's almost sort of beyond the second generation now. The Falklands seems so recent, even to me, you know, and obviously to you. And yet we seem to have moved on so far in that 40-year period. It's just absolutely bonkers when you look at the technology we had and now what we've got. I mean, a mobile phone could have defended the fleet now virtually, couldn't it? I mean,
well, I think it was a few years ago, somebody actually put on a Facebook page that it's now longer since the Falklands than it was from the Falklands to the Second World War, and you then think it's actually that close. You know, 45 to 82, 82 to 2007, I think it was, something like that. And you think, wow.
Yeah, man, yeah.
And the one that makes me laugh is when I was 17 to 20, I used to think, and I had respect, but look at all them silly old buggers at the cenotaph. And now guess what? I'm the silly old bugger at the cenotaph. Yeah, I've done it a few times. No, I wasn't there this year. Because I've started getting involved with Sea Cadets, so I was down at Bournemouth this year.
Okay, well, look, I'm going to button off now.
Okie doke.
Thank you very much.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, really interesting.
I hope you got enough.